And now I'm going to invite Maryam Namazie to speak to us. She is the spokesperson for One Law for All, and I hope that she will explain to us what's involved in that campaign.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all your contributions and for all of you who are here. Happy International Women's Day. A day of celebration, of course, of women's resistance and for women's rights, but also a day that reminds us of all the work that we still need to do. I would like to make a couple of points on the issue of gender apartheid, or what I prefer to call it sex apartheid, as a crime against humanity. And I think one of the important points to remember is that this gradual recognition of the situation of women in Iran and Afghanistan is the result of decades of struggle and resistance. This is a term that we've used for many decades now. I remember 30 years ago in front of Dutch parliamentarians who wanted to deport 1,500 Iranians, including women. I gave evidence there, and successfully we stopped the deportation with the International Federation of Iranian Refugees. But the term sex apartheid was used then, and why women should be returned back to Iran. And it's been decades now too that we've been calling for it to be considered a crime against humanity. For solidarity committees to be set up like during the resistance against racial apartheid, and also for an international day against sex apartheid. So these are things that we've been calling for many years. And of course this has always fallen on deaf ears. And there are many reasons for this. One, of course, is cultural relativism. How many times over these years have we been told that it's our religion and it's our culture and we have to accept it and suck it up, and this is what it is and that's how life is for you. And the question that the response we've always had is, whose culture are you talking about? The woman who's being stoned, or the state that is stoning her? They're definitely not of the same culture. And also, of course, it's fallen on deaf ears because it has to do with women, as we know very well. You know, crimes against women are always trivialized. They're always seen to be private matter, family matter, something that the patriarch's going to deal with. And there's always been this dominant view when it comes to women that women are somehow to blame for the situation that they're in. So, for example, we know with cases of rape, it's the length of your skirt. And in Iran and Afghanistan, it's were you disobedient? Did you not do as you were told? If you just followed the rules, everything would be okay. And I mean, the numbers of cases I can tell you about, I'll just tell you one as an example, is of this woman refugee that I worked with many decades ago, who came up to a Sharia court in Iran, they're all Sharia courts, of course, and said that her child was sexually abused and raped by the husband. And the judge said, oh, well, it's your fault, because if you had satisfied your husband, you wouldn't need to rape your daughter. So, I mean, this is basically, you know, there are so many cases of this sort. So it's this sort of constant blaming of women for their immodesty, for their disobedience, for their not fulfilling their duties, that has for very long justified sex apartheid. And also, of course, protection. It's always to protect women. And there's this great leftist academic activist, Silvia Federici. She's done a lot of research on witch burnings in Europe. And I think a lot of research needs to go in, from our perspective, on how similar that period is with what's happening with women in Iran and Afghanistan. And it's this whole idea of, trying to destroy the solidarity and community of women. For example, the term gossip was a very positive thing. Women came together to talk, to share information, but it's become so negative. And even with the witch burnings, how actually she's done research to show that it is at the advent of capitalist exploitation and a way of frightening society into accepting the exploitation and the change in the rules by attacking and suppressing and silencing women. And I think there's quite a lot of parallels that, especially now when we are definitely in a new era, and violence against women and targeting women is actually being used for this very change in the world situation that we're faced with. And of course, when we look at international law as well, we know that it has avoided and ignored women's rights violations. You know, for example, language that's used in to describe racial apartheid, domination, oppression. We don't have those terms in CEDAW, for example, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Violence Against Women. Discrimination against women. They say, for example, that the racial apartheid convention cannot be transferred to sex apartheid, but the genocide convention has been transferred to other examples. So it's always, you know, it comes back to this whole idea of, you know, it's got to do with women, so nobody gives a shit. And so what I want to say very clearly is that, and of course, because the world is the male perspective, it's, you know, and so women's issues have been ignored for very long. But I want to stress this fact that if we are here today and there is a conversation on sex apartheid being seen as a crime against humanity, it is thanks to the women of Iran and Afghanistan and to women in the region who have battled for decades for some recognition. And I think very often that's, you know, it isn't highlighted in the way that it should. And even though we live in a period now where it is an all-out war against women, we also are living in a period of women's revolutions. And that is why they are finally paying attention to us. You know, we have Rojava, which is a feminist center in a war zone, a secular center in a war zone. We have the magnificent women of Afghanistan, honestly standing up to the Taliban. Can you imagine? I'm just gonna call it better. It's something. You know, watching them in the streets with Taliban guns facing them. And we've got the magnificent Women Life Freedom Revolution in Iran. I mean, honestly, this is the period of, it is reigning women's revolutions, despite everything that is happening in the world today. And the very slogan, Women Life Freedom, you know, we're talking about a region where a woman is subhuman, is inferior, but the slogan of the revolution is woman. And it centers women in this battle because it realizes that you cannot liberate society without the liberation of women. Life in a region where it is ruled by death and destruction. And freedom in a region that is filled with totalitarianism and a religious right that is ruling on the bodies of women. And if we're talking about Iran, of course, this magnificent movement that is led by Generation Z, that is secular, that is modern, that is anti-clerical, that is, yes, dare I say, even anti-religious, that is defending women's bodily autonomy, even with topless protests in Iran, because they have taken and reclaimed body, which has been a tool for repression, and are transforming women's bodies into a tool for liberation. And why are men there? Not to protect women. They have benefited far too long from decades of sex apartheid. They are there because they have realized that they cannot be free until women are free. I want to just make a few other quick points. One is that, you know, we're asking Western governments, for example, please help, please intervene. Let's not forget that they gave the Taliban red carpet treatment and brought them back to Afghanistan. Let's not forget that they are constantly wheeling and dealing with the Iranian regime, with the Saudi regime. To be frank, you know, sex apartheid is good for business. And so I think if we're going to learn any lessons, it's not that they're going to save us, but that we're going to put so much pressure on them that they can no longer stand by and let regimes of sex apartheid rule. And that's exactly what happened in South Africa. They were very happy with racial apartheid in South Africa. They were very, very happy with it. They even called Nelson Mandela a terrorist. And yet, they were forced to help end racial apartheid because of the groundswell of opposition and resistance, both at home in South Africa, but also internationally. It was no longer possible for them to ignore racial apartheid. And we will make sure that they can no longer ignore sex apartheid in Iran and Afghanistan.
You're ending on a high. Look, you're
I know,
like,
it doesn't matter. I'm not interested in that. I'm so sorry. I just have a few more points.
You've got 1 minute.
Sure, thank you for timing my speech. I mean, I think what's important is that the final victory is not just about the law, while law is important. It is about an end to the Taliban regime and an end to the Islamic regime at the hands of women's revolutions. I think some other key points is that, of course, when we're talking about this issue, we have to also look at the role of religion. Religion was used also during racial apartheid. The Dutch Reformist Church, for example, they used religion as a way of justifying apartheid. The Islamists do that too. And I think we have to be very clear in this campaign to say that no religion, no idea, no culture can justify violence against women and sex apartheid. The other point I want to make is on the hijab, because I think that is also something that very often is disregarded in this conversation. And when we looked at the concept of racial apartheid, the segregation was implemented through Bantustans, which were separate homelands for black people, and they said it was to preserve African culture. And we hear that a lot about the hijab as well. It's to preserve women's modesty. You know, we're all pearls and we need to be preserved. And I think we need to look at how the compulsory hijab is actually an individual Bantustan for women. They must carry their Bantustans on their very backs. And so I think these sort of discussions around key aspects of sex apartheid, the hijab, religion, is also important when we take this conversation forward. We have to have frank conversations. And we have to recognize that it's not just a question of law. Law is important, but law comes after many years of struggle. And what we need is not just a law to say sex apartheid is a crime against humanity. We need an end to the Taliban. We need an end to the Islamic regime of Iran. And we need people everywhere, women especially, to support women in Iran and Afghanistan that are bringing down those regimes, not by regime change from above. We've seen what Western democracy does across the world. No thanks. What we want is their end via our hands, our women.